Let's move on now to our newspapers and tell you exactly what is making headlines this morning. No prizes for guessing what's going to come out trumps. But of course, let's start with the business day. And here we have Business Day. Their lead story this morning, welcome to a new coalition country, is what it says. Compromises loom for humiliated ANC in post-election horse trading as South Africa stands on the verge of a new political era as political horse trading has begun in earnest to shape the country's new government after a watershed general election failed to produce a clear winner. And then also McDonald's thwarts employees' attempt to extort 100,000 rand. EOH investors take charge to reclaim firm's value. And election results announce what's next. As political parties enter a difficult week of coalition negotiations, the countdown has begun for the constitution of Parliament, which has to be concluded within the next 2 weeks. And the first sitting of the National Assembly and provincial legislatures traditionally deal with the election of the president and the 9 provincial premiers. And also just a picture there from last night's announcement by the IEC.
All right, so here's the Star, and the front page of the Star, ANC urged to keep DA in the cold. Governing party hit by MK Zuma tsunami cautioned against aligning politically with their ideological foe. So the ANC scoring 40% at the polls, the lowest result in 30 years of democracy. The DA achieved 21.8%, while former President Jacob Zuma's newly formed Mkhonto weSizwe party got 17.4%. As early as Thursday morning, it was clear the ANC would not meet the 50% threshold for an outright majority. So they go a little bit deeper into the different coalitions, and certainly some warnings to not go with the DA, but there's warnings on the other side as well. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But the next story they've got there is MK leads the way as parties take IEC to court. And of course, the photograph is the MK party leader, Jacob Zuma, visiting the Results Operations Centre at the Gallagher Convention Centre. This snap was taken on Saturday. But what they go into is saying, for the first time in 30 years, the IEC has been slapped with court papers to set aside the 2024 election results declared at the Rock in Midrand last night. Various political parties that contested the elections are teaming up to challenge the outcome as null and void. So it's the parties together, the MKP, the ACT, that's the African Congress for Transformation, that's Ace Magashule's party, a former ANC Secretary General. So those are the two big parties leading the charge. What else is on the front page that I can tell you? Just that last one, ole, ole, ole. Sea Robbers, Rivero's Cup runneth over. Of course, the big one. That's the general feeling of every Orlando Pirates supporter. The Ghost are after their team won the Nedbank Cup crown, beating rivals Mamelodi Sundowns 2-1 at a sold-out Mbombela Stadium on Saturday afternoon.
And moving on to The Citizen. Now, what's the deal, Cyril? Whether we like it or not, the people have spoken, says President Cyril Ramaphosa about his party's dismal 40% showing as a free and fair national elections results were announced last night. Now, the ANC are still in talks about talks, but are not begging anyone to go into coalition to stay in power. But Ramaphosa is part of the deal, non-negotiable. That's according to Secretary General of the ANC, Fikile Mbalula, as 71 ANC councillors are today without jobs and all seats the party lost in the National Assembly. The party's veterans are working behind the scenes on a DA-IFP deal for a coalition, according to insiders. So that's the top story there. EFF down due to loss of loaned votes. Support loss to MK party, says Malema, adding the EFF is willing to work with the ANC and MK. And also Ramaphosa is a no-go in talks. ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula says other parties can't demand Cyril's dismissal. Those are some of the stories they deal with.
I also see that happening in the Sowetan, that the call for No, you cannot demand Cyril's removal, so that's another one they're going with. But on their front page is the big one, and I think it's the feeling that all of us are going through at the moment. Now we wait, because we are. This is now a waiting game. Not very long, but we wait to see. So begins days of political horse trading to form South Africa's first national coalition government after ANC's historic loss of power and security machinery ready to deal with threats of violence by those disputing election outcomes. Also, a focus on the weather there. That's a big one that we will bring you more details in our weather report, but certainly these weather conditions are looking quite bleak throughout the country. EMS is on high alert as cold front rains batter South Africa. How tobacco industry is luring the youth, and as is an opinion piece, MK Party's prospects of political longevity are bleak. But just in terms of that one about the instability and the talk of instability, so police say that they are ready with threats to South Africa's threats to SA stability. This is the Police Minister, Becky Cele, saying there is no room for threats of instability to register objections or concerns about the electoral process. He was briefing the media yesterday in Hatfield amid threats of violence should the IEC announce the final results from the polls held last week. So the Police Minister promising he's on top of this and that things will not get out of hand if there are any results of violence happening in the country. So yeah, that kind of wraps up the front pages of the newspapers.
Well, it does. Lots of talk, lots of speculation about what may or may not happen. And of course, everybody has a preference at this stage of how they would like to see this play out. But as I say, in the end, the ANC needs to weigh up its options and find the path of least resistance.
So we've got some nice analysis this morning. We really do, Sakina. I mean, we've got in the next hour Davi Root, who will give us, I suppose, the scenarios particularly for the economy and for South Africa, and which way the ANC decide to go, which will work out better. And then in the last hour,
better for the market.
Exactly. As I say, that's a market-focused one. And then perhaps in the next hour, we've got Professor Tuli Madonsela, and she'll give us the whole constitutional perspective and perhaps maybe talk about a little bit more as to which way these coalitions are going to work, how they will work, and what's better for South Africa in general. I don't know. It's going to be interesting, so don't go anywhere. We've got some very strong guests coming up.
It's very interesting because if you talk about how it will work, we don't have any framework, any legal framework governing how constitutions ought to function. And this, some would say, is perhaps a bit of a weakness given what we've seen happen at local government level. Whether we're going to get to that point where we do get in some form of legislation, we'll see. But this is where we find ourselves right now.
All right, SABCnews.com, we got you covered. We did it during the elections. We do it every other day of the year, and we're doing it right now.